It's joining us now for a bipartisan interview. The top members of the House Select Committee on the Strategic Competition between the United States and China, Wisconsin Republican Chairman Mike Gallagher and Illinois Democrat and Ranking Member Raja Krishnamoorthi. Thanks to both of you for doing this. We appreciate it. It certainly says a lot that you're appearing in a bipartisan way. We don't get that a lot. Chairman Gallagher, let me start with you. You've said that unity is America's greatest strength against China. So how are you and your fellow committee members going to keep tonight's hearing laser focused on China and going forward also, and not into partisan politics?
Well, I think it starts with the tone that Raja and I set in terms of how we work together. The good news is we've worked productively together for 6 years on a variety of issues. I think we've grown to respect each other, and we recognize that we don't have to agree on everything, but when it comes to the threat we face from the Chinese Communist Party, I think we see it clearly, and we want to identify that bipartisan center of gravity where we can push back against transnational repression from the CCP. And so I'm cautiously optimistic that we can do that on the committee, if for no other reason than if you look at the list of members that we have on both sides. Speaker McCarthy appointed very serious, sober members, not bomb throwers. And as well, Minority Leader Jeffries appointed some very talented Democrats that I've worked well with on the Armed Services and Intel committees.
And Congressman Krishnamoorthi, China's fraying ties with the West have been on full display recently. Obviously, the China spy balloon incident, U.S. warnings that China is considering arming Putin's army, the escalating standoffs about Taiwan, the Chinese Communist Party possibly spying on Chinese dissidents here in the United States, competition over semiconductor manufacturing, concerns over data privacy and TikTok, not to mention renewed questions over COVID's origins. That's just some of the issues here. What's first on your agenda, and why?
You're absolutely right. There's so many issues, and if you talk to Mike or my constituents, a lot of them have their own concerns about each of those issues. But you know, one of the issues that we're probably going to talk about tonight is the economic issues and the trade issues that have ended up hollowing out the manufacturing sectors in the heartland, whether it's Wisconsin or Illinois or other places, because of unfair trade practices, because of industrial espionage, because of forced technology transfer that many of our small and other businesses must engage in order to do business in the People's Republic of China. So I think that's going to be top of mind as well.
And Congressman Gallagher, Chairman Gallagher, one of the big issues, and I don't know how the United States can address it, is that there are so many dollars in China that organizations like the NBA and the film industry, they don't seem to care about the cultural genocide of Uyghurs or the oppression of the people in Tibet or Hong Kong or Taiwan. They just want those dollars. How do you convince them to change their mind?
Yeah, it's the same reason why John Dillinger robbed banks, because that's where the money is. So I think we have to appeal not only to people's patriotism, but start to put in place certain sensible legislative guardrails that at a minimum make sure that we, i.e. U.S. taxpayers, U.S. citizens, aren't unwittingly funding communist genocide or subsidizing our own destruction because we're allowing for technology transfer or American capital to invest in Chinese defense companies. Where this gets very complicated is because there's a concept in China of civil-military fusion. So at times it's very difficult to identify the opaque lines between a shipping company in China and the PLA Navy. And I would submit to you that the concept of a private company in China is tenuous at best and may not even exist. So I believe we can put in place a framework for sensible, selective economic decoupling, and that's something we're going to work together on the Select Committee on the CCP.
And that issue that you just talked about, whether or not there can't even be a private company in China, given the fact that it's an oppressive communist government, that comes in play when it comes to TikTok. And Congressman Krishnamoorthi, on Sunday, you said you do not think there will be an outright ban on TikTok in the United States this year. But just yesterday, the White House directed all federal agencies to ban TikTok on all federal devices within the next month. Clearly, the U.S. government doesn't want it on its devices. Canada is taking serious steps to get rid of it. Why not issue a ban on TikTok for every device in the U.S.?
Well, I think that what we're saying is we don't want it to be under the control of an adversarial regime. So, for instance, if there were a forced sale of TikTok USA to some other company, for instance, an American company, I think that people would be much more comfortable, because at the end of the day, you know, folks are obviously already exercised about social media. Certainly in my household, we're not super happy about this. But to have user data and then algorithms and content ultimately controlled by the Chinese Communist Party is a bridge too far. And I think that is the issue that we have to confront with regard to TikTok and ByteDance.
And Chairman Gallagher, you've talked about decoupling, you just did a minute ago, decoupling China's economy with the U.S. economy. How does that even work? What does it look like in practice? We get so many goods from China, and we sell so much intellectual property and product to China as well.
Yeah, well, I think it's critical to say, at least I'm not advocating for a complete decoupling. I don't have a problem with Wisconsin farmers selling soybeans to China. I don't think we're going to spend money onshoring textiles from China anytime soon. But when it comes to key technology or critical goods, think advanced pharmaceutical ingredients, we simply don't want to be dependent on the largesse of the Chinese Communist Party when it comes to access to life-saving drugs. So that's an area where we got to find a way to onshore, nearshore, friendshore, whatever the term of the day we're using. When it comes to rare earths, when it comes to energetics, the things that are in our weapon systems, I think we can take some steps to reclaim our economic independence, but it's not going to be a total decoupling. And as I alluded to before, I want to make sure that major asset managers and university endowments, as well as state and local pension funds, aren't subsidizing genocide in China or PLA modernization.
And Congressman Krishnamurthy, I read a piece in, I think, Politico, criticizing Democrats in general, not you specifically, and certainly there have been Democrats who have been hawkish on this. Nancy Pelosi, former Speaker Pelosi, has been hawkish on China for decades, but generally your party's not really been out there in the House. Why not?
Well, I think that it's a nuanced conversation, or it should be, because we want to make sure that at the same time that we make our differences known with the Chinese Communist Party, that we set aside the people of China or people of Chinese origin or Asian Americans, because we don't want to in any way encourage the stereotyping or discrimination or tropism that often infects our conversations with regard to the People's Republic of China. And certainly in the last 4 years, let's say, there's been a rise of hate crimes toward Asian Americans, and we don't want to contribute to that. So it's very clear that on this committee, I think Mike and I agree, our quarrel is not with the people of China or Chinese origin people. We need to stand up to the threats or challenges posed by the Chinese Communist Party.
Yeah, and nobody is more a victim of the Chinese Communist Party than the Chinese people. Wisconsin Republican Chairman Mike Gallagher, Illinois Congressman Raja Krishnamurthy, thanks to both of you. Hope you have success with this new committee, and I hope you guys come on a lot to talk about it. Very important issue.